And then he said, okay. And that's what I did. And I knew that it would either work really well or I would never work for him again. But I was ready to make that wager. And so we were in the theater at Lincoln Center, a few thousand people. The fashion crowd is a very jaded crowd. And I wanted to start with Ralph's baby picture. And so Audrey introduces the film, the lights go down, and on the screen, it fades up on Ralph's face as a baby. And there's this collective sigh from the audience. And I knew, nailed it.
Welcome to the podcast, Jeffrey Madoff.
Well, thank you for having me on, Jenna.
You're very welcome. So, Jeffrey, I have heard you say something about creativity, the way in which you describe it, that I really resonated with. And you said, creativity is how we express who we are. And I've listened to a few podcasts that you've been on, and I find most people tend to start with when you became a fashion designer. But I'd love to go a little further back into when you were an honors student, studying philosophy and psychology, and understand how creativity, in the sense of expressing who you are, showed up during your study.
Well, you get the award for asking a unique question to start off. I think that what it is that I have always been curious and had a very active curiosity. And when I had my freshman year, I hadn't declared a major yet, and I had a professor in philosophy. And what was so cool to me was that he could pose a question, you'd give an answer, then he'd, bam, chain, and that was a good finger snap. My finger snaps often aren't that good. They're pretty good. He would change on a dime and give you a different context, and all of a sudden you had to think of it differently. And I really liked that because you had to be very nimble, and you had to be a very active listener, and you had to be very curious in terms of the engagement and paying attention to what he was talking about. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. So this is an area where there aren't any right or wrong answers. It's just how well you could support what you believed in. And so that really fascinated me. Now, philosophy and psychology until 1932 were considered the same discipline. So philosophy is the study of life, is the translation. That's what philosophy means. And it wasn't until 1932 when Sigmund Freud wrote the entry into the Encyclopedia Britannica that they became two separate and distinct fields. So I thought it would also be interesting to read both philosophical ideas and psychological ideas and see where that difference was, and, the different thoughts that went into and ideas that formed those two disciplines that were totally interrelated and then became separate. And so I guess you could say that the creativity in terms of those was coming up with the ideas, coming up with the questions, and how you would challenge those ideas, and how you would have to challenge your own beliefs and come up with a rationale for why do you believe what you believe. And so I guess that's how it came up. But I think the through line in that, frankly, from when I was a little kid to now where I'm an older kid, is curiosity. And I think that curiosity, when you have questions, that causes you to want to create answers and to come up with things.
That's incredibly fascinating. I actually didn't know that about philosophy and psychology. Did you find when you were studying it that there was more room for curiosity in the philosophy part of your education versus the psychology?
No, they were both kind of rife, because when you were applying the ideas of psychology and the different studies that went on in terms of behavior. And recently, when I say recently, now I'm talking about the last 15 years or so, I became quite interested in behavioral economics. And behavioral economics is how we make decisions. And what are the factors? Because we all think we're very logical and make decisions for good reasons. We don't, and we aren't. And so behavioral economics is a relatively new discipline. It was founded by Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. And they wrote their seminal work back in, I think, 2005 called Heuristics and Biases. And it was so fascinating to me. It was like this just mind-opening and expanding work. It was actually quite academic, but the way that they talked about why we believe what we believe and how we make decisions was incredible. And Tversky died, and it was in like 2006 or something like that. I don't remember exactly. Your audience can Google it if they care. But they don't give Nobel Prizes posthumously. So Kahneman won the Nobel Prize, and it was for creating this discipline called behavioral economics, and about how we make decisions and how we form the thoughts we have.
Wow, very fascinating. So I would love to know, because obviously you're still extremely passionate about philosophy and psychology. That's very clear. At what point did you move from being an honors student in these areas to then becoming a fashion designer? Because I think for a lot of people that can feel like quite a jump.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, yes, I graduated with honors, but it sounds much more impressive when you say it than when I lived it, and it's just, I used to take very heavy class loads, so I ended up graduating early and I had a high grade point, and so I qualified for being an honor student. We've already talked about that more in this podcast, and I've probably talked about it in my life, so I don't.
I'm very proud of you, and I honor you for it.
Thank you, Mom. I really appreciate it. I've been seeking that approval for years, which is why I majored in. Yes, thank you. That's why I majored in psychology. How do I get what I need from my mother? I haven't gotten it yet. So thank you. That is a huge burden. And I somehow feel at peace now. So thank you very much, Jen. I appreciate that.
Oh, that's funny. So in terms of fashion designing, why did you move into that space from such a distinct change in your life?
Well, if you want to have a major that prepares you for nothing in the business world, I had two of them, so majoring in philosophy and psychology, the main thing you can do is teach or do research, and I was working in this little clothing boutique in Madison, Wisconsin. I went to the University of Wisconsin, and a friend of mine called me up and said, he graduated a year before I did. And he said, I've saved up some money. Can you think of a gig that would earn more than bank interest? And I could always draw. So I said, I see what we're selling here at this store. I'll design clothes. And he said, okay. And he sent me a check for more than the most money I've ever had at one time at that point in my life. And, the memory is a little bit hazy. I recall it being 1,500. He recalls it being 2,500. But whatever it was, it of course was nothing to start a business with. But I didn't know that. And, as the saying goes, ignorance is bliss. And, if he would have called me and if I would have been doing something else, I might have come up with a different idea. But because I was in the store, because I could draw, because I knew a little bit about the fashion business, because I was a buyer for that store, I thought, well, I could do that. So he was a good enough friend that he said, great. And he sent me the money. And there were some people that did alterations for the clothing we sold. And so I did some sketches and picked out some fabrics. And I was totally naive. I really knew nothing about that end of the business. I was so naive that I thought when I went to a store and fabric was on the bolt, I thought that was wholesale because it hadn't been made into anything yet. And I draw the distinction. I was ignorant, but not stupid. So ignorant, you can learn. Stupid's forever. So fortunately, I was just ignorant, but not stupid. And so I started learning because I had to learn the business in order to survive in the business. But I learned an important lesson, an important business lesson. And that is when I had that first group of garments made, we hung them in the store and they sold out immediately, like within the same day. So then they made twice as many, which meant about 2 dozen or something. And those sold out in a day. And this was a little boutique. So I had a proof of concept. And so we put together, I designed a whole line, got the samples made, strapped them on put them in a suitcase and strapped it on the back of my motorcycle, drove to Chicago, went to 18 stores. And at that time, there were a lot of independent specialty stores. And I think I sold 14 of them out of the 18, something like that. And so I, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, had, I don't really remember the amount for sure, but like $55,000 worth of orders. So then I had to figure out, how am I going to get this made? You know, because selling it's one thing, then you got to deliver on that promise of what you're selling. But what I did have and did get from that was proof of concept, which is essential for any pursuit that you're going to do, which is, you know, you can't be the only one in love with your idea.
Right.
Other people have to like what you're doing, and it has to go beyond your parents. And people have to be willing to pay for it. If they're not willing to pay for it, and they're just giving you words, the words are a bit empty. You know, so is there a market for what you're doing? And that's what proof of concept is.
Yeah, I think that can be quite challenging and obviously we'll certainly get into this topic more, but for people that more identify as being the creative artistic type versus more of the entrepreneurial business type, is there very, and I will generalize here, but there are some people that are very attached to their artistic expression. As you said, like creativity is how we express ourselves. So it's like sometimes people are more willing to stay attached to what they create, even if there's no proof of concept or market there, because it's sort of an expression of themselves. Do you see that manifest with people that you've come across in your life?
Well, so you raise a question that's got, you know, a lot of different directions to go into. Because if your desire, let's say that you love painting and you don't care whether anybody buys it or not, that painting is an expression for you. It's an outlet creatively for you. And maybe it's a great hobby. But if you want to make a living doing those paintings, you've got to determine if there's a market for it. So I never wanted to have a job and then have my creative stuff over on the side as a hobby. I wanted, because I, you know, always had jobs, you know, when I was a little kid, whether it was mowing lawns or shoveling snow or delivering newspapers, which that's not a job that exists anymore. But, you know, it was something that I always wanted to make a living with my ideas. And I didn't want those things that I thought were so important to me, being creative expression, to be hobbies. I wanted to figure out, how do I make a living doing this? Because this is what I love doing. This is what I want to be doing. So I got to figure out a way to make a living at it. Otherwise, it's a hobby. And I wasn't interested in having a hobby.
Right. So for people out there that, because I certainly know quite a few people that have their sort of 9-to-5 job and then their hobby, their artistic hobby. Outside of that, would you encourage people that maybe are a little bit more protective of their artistic expression to sort of be more open to what is in demand of the market and to potentially be more open to innovation in their own sort of creative pursuit?
No. And the reason that I say no is that maybe, your 9-to-5 job provides you with the income you need to support yourself or you and your family. You have that responsibility, and that you have your creative outlet, and it's fine that it's a hobby. However, if you feel compelled to want to make your life's purpose that kind of expression, then you have to take the risk that's involved in terms of making a living with your creativity and your ideas. So it depends on what you want out of your life. There's nothing the matter with having a regular job and you pursue those other things. You pursue those things in your spare time, so to speak. And so there's nothing the matter with having a hobby that you never expect to make a living at, but you still get a lot of enjoyment out of. So it just depends on what you want in your life and how you define success for yourself or fulfillment for yourself. And I think that there is a false dichotomy that a lot of people have between making a living and thinking that that's business, which it is. But I'm not creative, and business isn't creative, or that you think that you've got your creativity and you don't think that you're any good at business. And there's a lot of that kind of dichotomy, but it's not binary like that. And I think it becomes a rationalization when you say that, I'm creative, but I'm no good at business. Well, how do you know that? Or is that just something that seems to be true? And what I mean by that is, I've always supported myself doing those kinds of things. And I see business as a creative act. If you're an entrepreneur, I don't know what do you do, Jennah? Aside from, I'm sure you make millions doing a podcast. Right?
Yeah, this certainly isn't a hobby, Jeffrey. I do perspective coaching, life coaching, mindset coaching.
Okay. And so when you came up with the idea to do that, that in and of itself was a creative act. You had an idea in your head, and then you had to actualize that idea into a real life circumstance that you could hopefully build on and make a living at. Well, that's a creative act, going from idea to actualizing the idea. So I think that most people think of creativity, they think of writing, painting, playing a musical instrument, dance, all of those kinds of things. And they don't think of entrepreneurship as being creative, when in fact it is. And it's the same protocol. You got to have an idea up here. Then you have to be able to express that idea to others. And you have to be able to actualize that idea, be it a service like coaching or a product that you're selling or whatever it is. So I think we need also a larger definition of creativity to embrace more of those pursuits in life.
And talk to me about, I suppose, for lack of a better word, meshing business and your idea. Because I know certainly in my life, I've kind of struggled with that in the sense of showing up and expressing myself in my authenticity versus how I can sort of reach my goal through marketing in business. Do you ever, because I know that you mentioned authenticity in your book, Creative Careers, and I find that really fascinating because I think sometimes you can get slight pushback from people that aren't as much entrepreneurial at that point in their lives, where they're like, okay, I feel like I'm getting into the realm of where I'm starting to lose my authenticity in this pursuit.
So tell me what that means. What does it mean, losing your authenticity?
Well, I think I'll just use myself as an example. So, when it comes to my coaching, like I guess in my creativity, I identify myself as a writer and on websites and things like that, I can I self-express through written word. But I know that the way in which I write doesn't certainly, I don't think, a quote unquote marketer would sit in front of it and be like, this is the best way that you're going to get coaching clients or eyes on your work. And I find I kind of have to find this middle ground between me showing up in what I see as my authenticity, like authentic expression, but also having the ability to be able to put my business out there and have eyes actually want to be on it.
Well, I think that, authenticity is one of those words that's sort of gotten beaten to death.
Yes.
And I believe that you've got it made once you can fake authenticity. And I think that, for me, authenticity means being true to yourself and to your own expression. When you're doing something for the money, there's nothing the matter with it, but, because the money is necessary to keep your business alive. If you are, though, doing that and what you're doing is either conning people and not delivering value to them, then basically you're a con. But if you are delivering something that the market truly desires, and you're fulfilling on your promise, which is that you're providing a service in the case of coaching, that people stay with you because they like the impact you have on their life or the accountability and so on, then you've got a good symbiotic relationship going on because you have made a transaction, and a transaction requires a buyer and a seller. And you're selling your coaching expertise and they're buying it. And if they continue to buy it, then there's an authentic relationship that's forged, because it's not like you can make them buy it or make them stay with you as a client. So, but I think that what goes along with that, hand in glove for a lot of people, is what's called impostor syndrome. And the impostor syndrome is that you somehow don't think that you're good enough, and you keep that hidden. And so every day that you're pursuing what you're pursuing, but that gnawing feeling of, I'm really not that good, I don't really deserve this, then you feel like you're an imposter and a poser for what your activity is. And so I think, to me, the authenticity comes from two things. One is you having a clear sense of purpose and staying with that sense of purpose and building the kind of business where people are coming to you for and happy with what they're getting, so they continue to come to you to get that, and that you feel good about what you're doing because it's synchronous with your purpose. Does that make sense? Because I just made that up. So does that make sense?
Just faking it? No, it definitely does. Thank you for that, Jeffrey. And I love that you brought up imposter syndrome, because I've certainly experienced a lot of that in my life. And part of the reason of starting this podcast and humanizing high performers is my focus in sharing with others that, at the end of the day, we all sort of experience these fears and doubts. And the important part of it is overcoming them. When was a point in your life, because, I look at your life and you've lived a very, quote unquote, successful life in my eyes. When was a point in your life that you experienced imposter syndrome?
I can't say that I ever have. And the reason that I haven't is because I've always I always started my own companies, from that fashion company when I started that, I always was pursuing something that I wanted to pursue. And as a result, I never did anything that wasn't in line with what I wanted to do. So I never felt that, I never felt like I was an imposter because I was delivering on what I said I would sell. And whether, that was making films or making clothes or teaching. So that doesn't mean I've never had doubts, but I've never felt, wow, I've got these people fooled, but I don't know what I'm doing. Fortunately, I've never felt that, because I've always been my own compass in terms of the direction that I've done things. Doesn't mean it's all worked out. It doesn't mean it's all been successful, but it does mean that I've never had that sense of being a phony at what I'm doing, because I've always stayed to that purpose.
And what has that compass been for you?
I think just being in touch with my own desires. And what I mean by that is one of the things that I ask my guests in class every week, I teach that creative careers course at Parsons School of Design in New York City. And I ask people what is success to them and how they define success. And I think that, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just, how do you feel about what success is? And for me, as I started to think about it, and as my definition evolved over time, is that it is a combination of engagement and fulfillment, wanting to do what I'm doing and having a sense of fulfillment from doing it. Mm-hmm. So again, that was my compass, because the sense of purpose resonated with the activity that I was engaged in. And so I guess that's why I never felt that, because I always wanted to do things that engaged me and that I got a sense of fulfillment from. Now, one of the things also is when I started my various pursuits and achieving the sense of proof of concept that allowed me to move forward in it, that also reinforced that I knew what I was doing and that there was a market for it and that kind of thing. So I think, to me, at this stage of my life, having a sense of engagement, really wanting to be doing what I'm doing and getting a sense of fulfillment from it has been a great protective shield about feeling like an imposter from having that feeling.
I love that you asked that question, because I know certainly in my mid-20s, I was working in corporate and I didn't have a compass. And I found myself deeply unhappy and unfulfilled in a job that, from the outset looked very, I think, I made good money. I was around, famous and intellectual people. And it was, I thought would be a great job, but it was certainly one of the unhappiest I've been in my life. And I remember just before I quit this job, a very good friend at the time sat me down and she just said, Jennah, I don't understand why you don't want to be successful. And it was just such a profound moment in my life, because I realized in that moment that we all have different definitions of success. And though at that point in time, I didn't know what mine was, I didn't know what my compass was for success, I knew what it wasn't. And that was very empowering in me moving forward.
Yeah, well, I think, some people never ask that question. And, they hit a point in life where maybe financially they have acquired a lot of wealth and things, but they never did the internal work to figure out, is this what I want to be doing? And do I get something from this aside from a paycheck? And again, if you have family and friends and hobbies and things on the outside of your work that fill in that space, but it's not like I had a choice. It's, these are things that as my life unfolded, as ideas came up that I was attracted to, that's how I've always operated. So it was never appealing to me. I say that I'm an entrepreneur because I'm unemployable. So, it's never been, well, you could do this and then you could have all the other time to do these other things you wanted. Well, no, I wanted to do the things that I wanted to do and make money at them all the time, not have it off to the side, as I was saying earlier. So I think that it's, you have to do a lot of self-examination and come up with the answers for yourself of what works. And that doesn't mean that those desires don't change. Right. And even the direction you have in your life can change. But at least you have a starting point, and you have some sense that even if you want to change your destination, you've got a certain map that you've established in the way that you're following the path that you want.
And how do you guide your students to answer that question? Because I find, like, as you said, like, we don't really, like, some people don't even ask this question in their lives. And I think very subconsciously, most of us think the idea of success is wealth, it's possessions, like things like this, material items. If your students are answering in that way, do you guide them at all to sort of come from an internal motivation, or do you sort of allow the space for them to figure that out?
I do not tell them what they should be thinking. And I do not say to them, well, that's shallow. I don't do that. Because, first of all, I'm not a therapist, and I'm not there to be a therapist. But what I am there to do is to serve up a wide range of ideas, challenge thought so that maybe you think about something differently. So for instance, what you're talking about with the wealth and accumulation and so on, I might say, so is it possible that you're making as much money as you could ever want, and you have all the possessions you'd ever need? Is it possible that still you wouldn't feel successful? And usually the answer is yes. And then that opens a discussion. So then what does success mean? And how do you define it for yourself? So I believe that you learn through discovery. You don't learn from somebody telling you something. And I think that all the books, self-help books out there, for the most part, I don't put a lot of faith in them because I don't think that there's a recipe for success. And I also don't believe it's what I call the myth of replication, that you can't replicate somebody else's life. And if you do the same steps they do, because you can't, because you're different, your circumstances are different, your reactions are different, the people you're around are different. So other than best practices, which means show up, be ready, engage, be present, all those things, I don't think there's recipes for this stuff. And I think that critical thinking has a tremendously high value. And unfortunately, not enough people engage in that, which means challenging yourself about your fundamental beliefs and why you believe what you believe and so on. So I don't have to agree with my students, nor do my students have to agree with me. I just hope that I can help them find their voice and foster maybe asking the right questions that can help them find their own answers, because their answers are not my answers.
Right. Mm-hmm. I very much respect that. So, Jeffrey, talk to me about building a brand, storytelling, and how you've been able to do that in your life.
So brands are really interesting to me because way back when I was in school, Jennah, the only people that wore logos on their clothes, like I was on the wrestling team. So, if you got a letter sweater or a letter jacket, and actually, because I disliked my coach so much, I didn't want to wear my letter sweater. And I always thought, that's showing you're a member of a certain group, which is fine because we all need to feel connected to people. And I think that's really essential. But the point is that the logos were sports logos when I was growing up. That was about it. And you didn't wear your fashion logos. That was a billboard. That was a job of a billboard that was marketing or selling the clothes. So when fashion companies started putting their logos on shirts or on dresses or on handbags or whatever, that was signaling who you were, what you valued, and all that sort of a thing. And I always felt I didn't want to do that, but I felt like the dynamic of that related back to sports. You wanted to be part of a team. You wanted to be connected to something. You want to be connected to a group, those sorts of things. So brands started when the first brands were getting built, and they weren't really called brands back then, but you think of very successful brands like Walt Disney. So Disney was a brilliant, brilliant marketer. And when I was a kid, Disneyland had a show every Sunday in prime time. And when they built the first amusement park in Anaheim, California, you went to Disneyland. Disneyland was an immersive entertainment, which wasn't a term, but that's what it was, but it wasn't a term back then. And you were living in this fantasy land. In fact, one of the attractions was Fantasyland, and that Disney immersed you in their story and in their brand. So the different things were made up of characters from Disney films and animations. And what you saw was this story come to life. So what that led me to, as I thought about these things, because I thought it was really fascinating, was that a brand is a story that's well told. So if I said to you, and I will say it to you, so Jennah, what would you say the Disney brand stands for?
Oh gosh. Well, I would say that element of fantasy, sort of getting lost in a magical story, a fairyland story.
Well, that's true. That's true. But what it is that Disneyland is also wholesome family entertainment, because the kids aren't going to buy tickets and go there. So you got to make the kids want to go there. That's the part you're talking about. And then the parents, they have to pay for it. So this is something the family can do together. It's wholesome family entertainment. And that's, of course, what they've built their empire on. And so you can count on that wholesome family fantasy for the kids, entertainment, and nothing that's going to disturb the parents, along the way. Snow White's naked. It's nothing like that. It's there's not going to be any surprises other than that magical fantasy. So then you get to Nike. So Nike's tagline, right? Their slogan?
Of course, just do it.
Right. But think for a minute how incredible that is. And I've been in front of like 5,000 people speaking, and I'll say that, and it's like you're in church and everybody says, just do it, all in unison, because everybody's singing from the same hymnal when you have a brand. And so the just do it has to do with athletic excellence, of which almost no significant number of people that wear Nike will ever achieve, but it's that fantasy that you're in that group. So when you see the Nike swoosh, there's an immediate resonance with athleticism, athletic achievement. And then I think, by the way, just do it is one of the most brilliant slogans any company has ever come up with, because it works in every pursuit of life. It's basically get off your ass, just do it. And so all brands that are successful have a story behind them. There's a certain narrative that drives it. So Apple doesn't talk about the technical features of their iPhone, or they don't talk about the technical features of the iWatch or anything. What they talk about is the fun you'll have with it. So, it's cool, hip technology. That's their story. And, nobody's passionate about buying a Lenovo computer, even though arguably you get more value for the money if you do, because Apple's been so successful at creating this ecosystem and the story of their brand that it's incredibly seductive. And so a brand is a story well told, and it's knowing what it is that is meaningful to your market and how you reinforce that in everything you do.
And I know that you moved from fashion designing into film and video production. What was the story behind that company of yours?
Which company was that? My fashion company?
The film and video production company.
So, what I did and tried to establish my value was that I delivered really good looking work that told my client's story in a compelling and effective way so that people would want to buy their stuff. And so Ralph Lauren was a client for 36 years, and I did that with Ralph Lauren or Victoria's Secret, where I was very clear on what their brand was. I always tried to come up with new ideas and new stories to tell, but all that reinforced their main narrative. And I think I'm a big believer in when you have clients, if you're looking out for their best interests, you're also looking out for your own, because you give them no reason to ever go anyplace else. You keep innovating, you keep telling good stories, and you keep getting enlisted with them. So that was my story with my production company, was that if you hire Madoff Productions, you're going to get great work. There's thought behind it, a story that's embedded in it that's consistent with your brand story, because they understand what brands are and what you need to do to be a successful brand.
And I love that you mentioned Ralph Lauren, because I've heard you share a story which I absolutely loved about him being awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award. And you were asked to help create a video for him in receiving that. And you suggested that he showed pictures of his childhood and sort of show more of a humane side, like show his humanity throughout this video, and that he was first slightly resistant to that. Can you share with us that story?
Yeah. So Ralph was going to get a Lifetime Achievement Award at Lincoln Center, which is one of the premier venues in the United States for entertainment. New York City Ballet is there. The New York City Opera is there. Major Broadway shows are there. And Ralph was going to be presented his award by Audrey Hepburn, who is a Hollywood icon. And so there's a film that accompanies the getting of the award. And when I was having dinner at Ralph's home with he and his wife, Ricky, and, we were talking about the film, and I had noticed these binders, and I said, "What are those?" And it said they're family albums. I said, "Could I see them?" And so he's showing me, and I saw baby pictures of Ralph, pictures when he was a little kid, pictures when he was a teenager, all these kinds of things. And I said, "Oh, this is great. I want to use these in the film." And he goes, "No." And I said, "Ralph, we looked through all of your archives, all of the beautiful pictures you've had made, but there was something missing." And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "The humanity. You're a father, you're a husband, you had your childhood like we all did. And I want to show that story so that you are humanized, that there is the brand, but you are the man behind that brand. And you had hopes and dreams like everybody else has." And he said, "No, I don't want to go there." Coincidentally, I had with me a DVD of a film that I had made for my parents' 50th anniversary. And what my sister and I were putting together a surprise party for my parents. And I had just finished editing it. And so it happened to be in my backpack. And a light went off in my brain. And I said, "Ralph, I want to show you something." And I put the DVD in, and he and Ricky watched it. And at the end of it, they were crying. And Ralph said to me, "I'm crying. I don't even know these people." And I said, "That's what I want to do for you. I want to establish that emotional connection." And then he said, "Okay." And that's what I did. And I knew that it would either work really well or I would never work for him again. But I was ready to make that wager. And so we were in the theater at Lincoln Center, a few thousand people. the fashion crowd is a very jaded crowd. And I wanted to start with Ralph's baby picture. And so Audrey introduces the film, the lights go down, and on the screen, it fades up on Ralph's face as a baby. And there's this collective sigh from the audience. And I knew, nailed it.
Wow.
I got it. And but for truly the last minute of the film, people were on their feet cheering. And knowing Ralph as I do, he wasn't winning the, Lifetime Achievement Award for a fashion designer. He was winning an Oscar, the highest honor you can get in the movies, with Audrey Hepburn, who is one of the people he grew up watching on the screen. And so this played into his fantasy narrative also. And so it really worked. So it reinforced his brand. It was sometimes with clients, you need to not give them what they want, but give them what they need. But you have to get there through a particular path, and you have to know what the entry points are that you can make your point and get it across.
It's such a beautiful story. How important do you feel like showing your humanity in your business is?
I think it's important in life, not just in business. We are human beings. And I think that the more relatable we are, to me, that is more attractive when you get that vulnerability, when you get that humanity, because, we all share some basic traits. And how we manifest those, even in the United States through these incredibly divisive times that we're living in, if we can become aware of our shared humanity and shared desires, I think that can be quite healing. And I think that's really important.
I looked towards the back of your book and I noticed in the thank you section of your book, you thanked your Year 4 teacher, Mr. Ripley, for teaching you.
Mrs. Ripley,
Mrs.
yes.
Is it? Sorry. I wrote down Mrs. Ripley. And you said that you are grateful for her teaching you how great teachers teach. Can you share with me now, obviously, as you being a teacher, what it means to you to be a great teacher that teaches?
I think that if you can help a student find their own voice, if you can encourage them to express, which you do without criticism, you do it with being supportive. And that doesn't mean everything they do is great. And I'm not talking about, packing students in cotton so they don't absorb the bumps, because bumps are a big part of life. You get those. But, what she did was, there was the humanity because she had doubt and expressed that. There was the curiosity, which she knew how to engage, and that she would encourage you to ask questions and talk in class. And she was the first teacher I had that did that. I, in fact, had teachers say, you asked too many questions.
Wow.
Now, fortunately, I had the support of my parents who encouraged asking questions. So she was a teacher that had a huge impact on me because she encouraged curiosity. She wanted to know why you thought that way about something. And so that, obviously, since it's so many years later, had a huge impact on me. Her kindness, her insight, her encouragement, her questioning, all of those things. And so I thought, when I teach, I want to be a teacher that encourages the best in the students. And what that means is that I engage and involve them in the learning process and discovery. That's what she did.
I think that is so incredibly important. And I was quite similar. I certainly ask a lot of questions myself and have been told many a time that it's too many. Probably hence why I've started a podcast. But I think particularly when it comes to teachers, it is just so important to allow that space for children, or really anyone, to be able to explore and sort of express. Because I think that, as you said, it can be shut down, unfortunately, and I think that can be quite hindering to people's growth and creativity. So I really honor that. A question that I loved that you asked in the book, that you said that you asked your students, is knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self starting out? Talk to me about this question, because I read you've shared answers in your book from many different quote unquote successful people. And I thought that the answers to this question were just very transformational.
So what would you like to know about it?
I would like to know, I guess your answer to the question would be a good start.
Well, I think that knowing what I know now, if I could go back in time, I would have bought stock in Apple, Google, and Amazon.
That's fair.
Wish I would have done that, you know. In terms of, when I ask that question to my guests, I think it is really interesting. Some of the answers, like take more risks or that kind of thing. But my feeling is, for myself, because I've always gone after what it is I wanted to do. I mean, on one hand, like I'm doing a play now, and that's incredibly exciting to me, incredibly fulfilling. A lot of work. Takes a long time. If I knew how long it took to mount a play, I would have started when I was younger. So I think that, also I've had thoughts of, I wish I'd have tried to do X sooner within my field, but do X sooner. But I think that I'm more ready now than I was then. I know more now than I knew then. And so I think that that may be a rationalization, but I think that for me, that's the only thing I can think of trying certain things earlier, but then I either rationalize my way out of it or truly believe that, I couldn't have written the play as well as I've written it if I had have done that 25 years ago.
Right.
I couldn't have done certain things as well because I've just gotten better at all of the things that I do. I'm a better storyteller. I'm a better director, because the more that I've done those things, the better that I've gotten. And so I fortunately will stay with my answer. Yeah, I wish I would have bought Apple and Google and Amazon, because then I wouldn't have any financial concerns about pursuing all the things I want to pursue.
Yeah. Yeah, some of the answers that I loved in your book that I resonated with were, don't get caught up with what other people think of you. I think that can be a huge limitation with people, particularly starting out in their pursuits. Another one was, learn to be okay with hearing no. I think that's a goodie, because I think that if you place your self-worth on the line on what you do, that can be a very hurtful one. And ask for help. I think in your book, you talk about it. There's a term that you use, I'm sorry, I don't remember, but sort of talking about, I think it's like the lone genius or something, about, having this
the myth of the lone genius.
The myth of the lone genius, and thinking that you sort of, there's something romantic to doing these things on your own.
Yeah, well, I think, for instance, Thomas Edison, supposedly, the image we have of him is this brilliant inventor sitting alone in the laboratory, creating the light bulb. Or you think of Steve Jobs, this brilliant guy, who brought Apple to the platform where it could become the largest company in the world. but they didn't do it alone. And it's interesting to me because that myth is perpetuated in books and movies, and oftentimes, like with Steve Jobs, his greatest creation was himself, and creating himself in his black turtleneck and pants and the presentations that they would do at Apple. He created this archetype that he was of the brilliant lone genius in the face of Apple. Now, clearly, Apple has continued monumental growth since his death, and Tim Cook is nothing like Steve Jobs. But he has continued to build that business. Now, maybe Cook wouldn't have had a business to build if it wasn't somebody who was more visionary, less visionary than Jobs. So when that handoff came, when Jobs died, there was that vision of who Apple is already established, and that Cook was a good enough manager who morphed into being a good enough leader that he could carry on that legacy. So we don't do these things alone. So when with the play that I wrote, when we started our rehearsals for the workshop, I looked around the room when we were going to do our first read through, and there's like 57 people in the room. And that was management, that was the theater management, that was the actors, the musicians, the different administrative staff that were there. And I'm thinking, wow, this started with an idea I had and started writing it down. And now look at all the people involved. Well, it wouldn't be anything but words on paper if I didn't get all these other talents enlisted to bring it to full-blown life. And so I think that myth of the lone genius sets up, it makes for a nice movie or a nice book, but it's almost never true.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And if there was one, I suppose, skill that you would encourage people that are listening, and particularly in relation to your book, encourage people to develop in terms of their creative business pursuits, what would that skill set be?
I'd say there are three things. One is be a good listener, being engaged and active listener, so that you're not only taking in what the other person is saying, but even more importantly, that other person is feeling heard. So whether that's somebody that's working with you or whether it's a client, you are acknowledging their ideas and contribution so that they feel heard. That's really critical. That you have to stay curious. So what that means is go to plays, go to films, go to movies, listen to music, go to meetups, take part in Zoom conferences, talk to people you've never talked to before, expose yourself to ideas constantly. Because what happens is that there's more dots that can be connected in your brain that form constellations of ideas. So be curious. And that's a minute-to-minute, day-to-day pursuit in life, is stay curious and keep educating yourself. And then realize that perseverance is what it takes to ultimately make it in business, because it's hard and it requires a lot of work. And everything that is promising you shortcuts to that success is bullshit, because there are no shortcuts. It's hard work, it's perseverance, it's dealing with the no, and not letting that stop you or discourage you, and to keep going forward. And when you get knocked down or you get disappointed, being able to get up and persevere. So you need that resilience to be able to get back up. And all of that comes from believing in your mission. So if you don't believe in your mission, it's hard to put up with all the disappointments and obstacles along the way. But if you do believe in it, you can weather it. Not that it's easy, but you can weather it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that the mission part is so fundamental, but I think a lot of us don't realize that we don't actually have a clear mission set and forth. And as you're saying, when we come up against obstacles, which we inevitably do, It's really that point that we really need to pull on our why as to what we're doing. So Jeffrey, thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. Thank you for sharing your story and your insight. On a final note, I would love to ask you, what does it mean to you to be human?
I think to be human is to be aware of your own mortality. And being aware of your own mortality, I think embeds a sense of purpose and mission in your life. And I don't think you become aware of that till you get older. But I think that that is a defining human trait, is that.